Well, friends, that sound you hear in the background, that truly is the fat lady warming up her pipes, getting ready to sing. Hi, I wanted to give you the latest update on impeachment. The expression you've heard before, the fat lady's ready to sing or the fat lady's singing, is an expression meaning the opera's over now and it's soon time for the performance to end. And that's about where we are with impeachment. The fat lady is getting ready to sing on Adam Schiff and his scam impeachment circus. They've gone about as far as they can go. Not that they'll quit, but as far as they're going to get with the senators. And the vote to acquit President Trump from this nonsense is scheduled for Wednesday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So, since we last gave an update, a few things very significantly have happened, and that was last week on Thursday and Friday. We saw the period of questions from the senators, and of course it was 2 days of writing down questions, giving them to the Chief Justice, and him reading them. And of course they're all designed to be gotcha questions. They're all designed to be softball questions for your side in the debate and to make the other side look silly. But it also provided an opportunity for both sides to clarify anything and to also state their positions over and over again. The one thing, as I said, that the Chief Justice requested before this all began was that they limit their responses to about 5 minutes so there wouldn't be any of these long-winded Schiff speeches, I guess, that were going to go on. Now, I'll talk about those in the questions in just a minute, but where do we stand now? Well, after today, they have a couple days of closing arguments, or I think they're both done today. I didn't spend much time watching it today because after a while your brain goes numb and your ears start to bleed listening to this nonsense over and over again. But I think now what's going to happen tomorrow into Wednesday is senators will be able to make final comments before the vote. They'll probably talk about whether or not they should have a vote or they're ready for a vote. Whatever. It's all irrelevant. I mean, Mitch McConnell has already set the timeline and he controls the show. So the vote to whether to remove Trump from office or to acquit him from these bogus charges is set for 4 o'clock Wednesday. So at that point, the fat lady will be singing at full volume and the silly nonsense of this particular impeachment will be over. I don't want to pretend that the Democrats are going to quit because they're going to keep after Trump and after Trump and after Trump right up to the election in November, and after he does win, assuming that he does win, they're going to do whatever they can for the next 4 years to try to derail him, because they're fighting for their political lives, and all their money and all their lobbyists and all their allegiances are all falling by the wayside because of Trump's effectiveness. So they have no choice. So hang in there, folks. It's an ugly period in American history we're going through, but we are winning. I want to emphasize that we are winning. Today, I did listen to a few of the arguments that were being made by the Trump defense team. Once again, Ken Starr was very eloquent, very polished, very soft-spoken, and yet he threw daggers right into the heart of Schiff's whole team with their lawlessness, their lack of competence, their illegal efforts. He pointed out to the Senate that, look, just because the House has the authority to impeach doesn't mean that they're above the law. And if they don't do their job right or if they abuse their power, they need to be held accountable for that as well. We know there was no due process in the House, and he pointed that out very clearly in a way that, of course, Schiff and his minions couldn't argue with. Obviously, you still see the other side trying to hide the identity of the whistleblower because they're still trying to protect Biden and they're still trying to protect Obama from all the scandal that went on with all of this coup attempt of trying to get rid of Trump. But it was interesting with the questions. At that point, Mitch McConnell did not know if he had 51 votes to cut off this notion of having witnesses. And that was going to be the vote that happened, and that actually happened on Friday. because obviously the Democrats were grasping at straws and were trying to extend this thing any way they could, and they wanted to get Bolton in because he supposedly said this stuff in his book and all this nonsense. So what happened with that? Well, in order to shoot down the resolution that Schumer was going to offer, or did offer, about witnesses, they would have needed 51 votes. Now, there are 53 Republican senators in the Senate, so they should have easily had the votes. However, there were 4 senators that were squishy. One was Lamar Alexander from Tennessee, who's retiring, and he was somewhat of a moderate. He's not so much an ideologue, but just he's somebody who could have been swayed one way or the other. The second one was Lisa Murkowski from Alaska. Third one was Susan Collins of Maine. And, of course, the fourth one is that old, not even rhino, Mitt Romney, who was going to vote any way he could to try to hurt Trump because he's such a petty small man. He's still mad that Trump refused to make him Secretary of State, and he still can't believe that somebody like Trump was elected president and somebody with his obvious pedigree and intellectual superiority wasn't in 2012. This man is a complete buffoon, but this is how he's going to behave, this petty childishness, and that's how he did behave, by the way. He did vote to have more witnesses. He voted with the Democrats, is what he did. So did Susan Collins of Maine, because she's owned by Planned Parenthood and all the other left-wing groups have twisted her arm for years. She's never been a reliable Republican vote. So she went along with the Democrats as well. What happened, however, was that Lamar Alexander and Lisa Murkowski voted with the Republicans. So 2 of those 4 went the right way and 2 didn't. It ended up being a 51-49 vote, as you already know, to not have any more witnesses brought forward. That meant they would move into the phase of deciding on having the closing arguments and then moving towards a verdict in the whole situation. But I got some background into what was really going on. Ted Cruz has begun this podcast since impeachment began. It's called The Verdict with Ted Cruz. You can see it online various places. And he kind of has been analyzing what's gone on each day with the impeachment and given behind-the-scenes stuff. Well, the one on Friday, I believe it was Friday, I think it was his 10th podcast. You'll have to look it up. It's available for you to find. I'll see if I can't link it to the bottom here. He has another individual there who he has a conversation with. It's not just him talking. The other guy asks him questions and so on. So he kind of represents us, like if we were having a conversation with Ted Cruz. But also, Senator Lindsey Graham was with Cruz. And they told a pretty amazing story because they were working behind the scenes furiously to make sure that this witness thing would be defeated. So what happened was Graham was working with Lamar Alexander because they've known each other for years and they're both from the South. They're both Republicans from the South. And he managed to get Alexander to realize that the Senate would be damaged forever by forcing it to go beyond its normal purview in these kind of situations. That it was not the Senate's responsibility to do the work that Schiff and his minions in the House didn't do. If they didn't bother to call the witnesses because they didn't want to wait for the courts to rule on executive privilege, that was their choice. That had nothing to do with what the Senate should now do and have the Senate do their dirty work for them. And I think that what Graham felt was he managed to get through to Alexander that he needed to protect the dignity of the Senate by not allowing this stunt to be pulled and them to be manipulated by the House in this manner. So he did get Alexander to vote the right way. Cruz was working on a number of things, and one of the things that he felt he had to do to get Murkowski on board was to give the Democrats the hypothetical that, okay, let's say Trump did do a quid pro quo. Is that illegal? Is that impeachable? And he managed to pull an argument out from the defense side to say that even if you're going to say that there was a quid pro quo, which there wasn't, it's something that's very normally done in politics, and it wasn't something, it was for the benefit of the country. Basically, all of our relations with other nations involve a quid pro quo of some kind. You know, we don't just give money blindly to other countries unless you're Obama shipping all that money on pallets, cash and pallets to Iran in the middle of the night. But aside from that, there's always a quid pro quo. There are always conditions. Look, we'll give you aid if you do such and such a thing. And usually it's, make sure that you're a good ally, or that you fix some of your problems, or that we have guarantees of trade, future trade, etc. I mean, that's just the way it works. And as it should, we shouldn't be giving taxpayer money away with no conditions on it. My goodness, that's just asking for fraud and corruption. So they make that argument, and that basically negated the need for Bolton to testify, because all of Bolton was perhaps going to say, we don't even know that because we don't know exactly what he wrote in his book. This was an anonymous, unsourced person that the New York Times quoted in this, who claims to have read the draft version of his manuscript where he was saying that he felt Trump was wanting to do a quid pro quo. So basically he was saying it doesn't really matter, because even if you say he did, it was for the good of the country, so anything Bolton could add is irrelevant, so we don't need witnesses. Well, that was one of the things I think that helped to persuade Murkowski that, yeah, this wasn't necessary, why drag people through it. The other one that Cruz clearly points out that I thought was fabulous was one of the last questions that was asked was sent in by our favorite fake Indian, Elizabeth Warren. I call her Chief Spewing Bull. She sent a question which basically accused the Chief Justice of being biased in favor of Trump. That she was accusing him of being in a tank for Trump, and it's really not a legitimate impeachment because he shouldn't be there, and this has been the mistake the Democrats have made through this whole thing. They have insulted the jurors. Now, granted, she's technically a juror too, but Nadler got up and insulted them. Schiff got up and insulted them. The members of the Senate I'm talking about. And basically she did too, including insulting the Chief Justice of the United States. Well, that was so repugnant to Murkowski. That was one of the things that helped turn her to vote against witnesses, because she said, look, there's no way that Trump can get a fair trial here, because this is the kind of bias that's going on here. So between those two guys, Graham and Cruz, they worked hard behind the scenes to make this a victory, because once the Democrats lost the ability to extend this sham trial out with having more witnesses, because after they got done with Bolton, there would have been another one, and then there would have been another bombshell, and somebody else would have come forward, and some other anonymous whistleblower suddenly would have known something, and the whole point would have been to just trash things out for months. So it's not going to happen. Anything that Schumer has tried to do since then, basically he puts forth a motion, and McConnell jumps up and says, I move that the motion be tabled, which means it's not going to be considered at this time. In other words, it's gone into oblivion. It's not coming back. So at any rate, we saw today that they each had 2 hours, each side had 2 hours to give their closing arguments. Schiff, I saw from the one video time signature, it took him almost a half an hour to give his, but yet when Pat Cipollone got up, he took like 6 minutes, because they didn't need to beat a dead horse. They've made their case, the other side has not, and so there's not much left to be done. Now, the only sad thing about all this was the timing on it. Tomorrow night, Tuesday night, Trump will give the State of the Union. He'll go into the House of Representatives. He'll sit right in front of Pelosi and Pence. They sit in the two back seats. and he will talk about the State of the Union. It would have been wonderful if this impeachment acquittal would have happened before this rather than the day after it. Because, the media is going to spin it. Here he is with this hanging over his head yet, and he's in the Pelosi, blah, blah, blah. But Trump wasn't going to give in to Pelosi and say, well, you forced me to, postpone this. So his people thought, let's do it. And so that's what he's going to do. And then Wednesday, unless there's some other unknown thing that greatly happens, there will be a vote in the Senate, and the acquittal will happen. Now, again, I don't know what the final numbers will be. In order to remove him from office, to not acquit him, they need 67 votes to do so, and they will not get that. They've got 47 Democrats. That means they would need 20 Republicans to vote with them in order to make that happen. It's never going to happen. Probably Twit-Mitt will vote with the Democrats. I mean, who knows how petty he still is going to be through all of this. Maybe he'll read the tea leaves and see that even some Democrats are going to vote to acquit, and maybe he won't. They usually do a roll call vote, and it's alphabetically by the last name. So Romney with an R is later on. He's not all the way at the end, but he's well into the voting. Now, if he needed to test the wind a little bit, he'd see many senators voting before him. So, and I wouldn't be surprised if we wouldn't see some of the Democrat senators to also vote to acquit, because they're thinking of their political futures too. I will be hugely surprised if Joe Manchin from West Virginia votes to remove Trump from office, considering how huge Trump's victory in West Virginia was over Hilly May in 2016. Manchin would be an absolute fool to vote against his own state. Quite frankly, what should happen there is Manchin, I know he's a political chameleon and you can't trust him, he's slimy as all get out, but from a practical political point of view, what he should probably do is, after Trump gets reelected, is just switch parties and become a Republican himself. Then he doesn't have to play the charade game quite as much. And since West Virginia has trended Republican in the last number of years, I mean hugely so, he doesn't lose anything by doing that. But I can't advise him on that. It would give another Republican in the Senate guaranteed, but at any rate. And then in Alabama you got Doug Jones, the radical left-wing kook who beat Roy Moore just a couple years ago. He's up for re-election now, so he will also have to vote against most of the people in his state if he votes to remove Trump. So, and there could be a few others too. I don't know at this point. We'll see. I mean, it would be great if they'd get 5 or 6 Democrats to vote to acquit. Then they can say it was bipartisan. And also then Romney looks like an even bigger fool if he votes to convict Trump. But at any rate, we'll see how it turns out. But be positive, be thrilled, because the fat lady is warming up her pipe. She's going to sing her heart out on Wednesday afternoon, and there will be a victory for the president in this. Now, again, as I've said, that doesn't mean there won't be still efforts on the Democrats' part to try to continue this impeachment sham. Schiff has got nothing else left in his life to do other than this. So if he fails miserably here and can just be made a fool out of, his career is over, and he'd like to be senator in California. God forbid that should happen. But so there'll be other nonsense. There'll be other smoking guns and other evidence supposedly come out between now and the election. I mean, that's just the sleazy politics that we're dealing with. And I've talked about that here before, so I'm not going to go through all of it again. The bottom line is, this phase is soon going to be over. The president can get out from underneath this nonsense. He won't have to spend one more minute thinking about it, and he can continue doing the good things he's doing, like the USMCA that was just signed last week, like the new proposed peace plan with Israel and the Palestinians. And also he's promised now he's going to work on a middle-class tax cut coming up. Whether the Democrats will go for that or not doesn't matter. All he has to do is offer it, and if they vote against it, well, they've got to answer to the voters in November. So it's amazing how many of these liberal Democrats suddenly become fiscal conservatives right before election time. At any rate, thank you for listening. Please subscribe and hit the notifications bell so you get new updates, and we will keep you informed on the things that are happening. So enjoy the finale in the opera.